get you to talk a little bit in your normal time?
Sure. My name's John Dortch, 48 years old.
Okay, John, would you state your name again, please?
My name's John Dortch.
And why don't you tell me a little bit about your problem you had?
Back in 1990, I had an accident. I was working cable TV, and cable line snapped with me, and I broke both my hands. And ever since that, I've been having Brian Crouppen help me negotiate with the insurance company to get us some kind of a settlement. And without Brian Crouppen, I'd be paying the insurance company back right now for my all my operations I had. And
What made you pick them, or when did you decide to come to Brown and Crouppen?
I saw their advertisement on television, and some of the guys I worked with on the cable company, they had some dealings with them and said they was fair people, you know, would work with you.
Is this an ongoing case, or is it over?
It's still going on. It's been almost 5 years now, over 5 years, going on 6 years.
And what kind of things did you like about the way Brown and Crouppen has worked with you?
If I ask a question, they're ready to give me an answer for it and help me the best they can, you know. Their hands are tied just like mine are until the insurance company decides they want to work with us, which, like Terry Crouppen says, they're not going to give me all the money I want.
Would you recommend us?
I would recommend Brian Crouppen to anybody, because they have got some lawyers that know what they're doing. And without a lawyer, you're up a creek without a paddle.
Okay. I would suggest that we go through the whole thing again. So we got it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else
You want to try a different procedure?
No.
Okay, John, we're just going to do that whole thing again.
Okay.
Just state your name and tell us a little bit about the history of the project, first of all.
Okay, my name's John Dortch. I had an accident working cable TV back in 1990, which I broke both my hands. And after the accident, after I got out of the hospital, I contacted Brian Crouppen, and they took my case on. And we've been fighting for some kind of a settlement with the insurance company ever since 1990. And it's an ongoing process. Without Brian Crouppen, I would be hurting really bad, because the insurance company doesn't want to give you anything when you're injured.
What kind of things about Brown and Crouppen do you like, the way they work with you?
If I call, they give me an answer. If they don't have the answer right now, they find someone that does have the answer that's in their organization, and they get back to me within minutes and help me out.
What was the...
Wait, John, did you answer that again, but say, the thing I like about Brown and Crouppen is, and then what you just said? When
Thing I like
if I have a
best about-
question, I answer it, you know. in other words.
Okay.
The thing I like best about Brown and Crouppen or something like that. So,
The thing I like best about Brian Crouppen is that they help when I call and ask for help, and they give me my answers right away.
what was the insurance company's position? Why didn't they want to pay off? Or what was the deal there?
They feel that they got the money, you know, and they don't want to give it out to nobody. They want to keep it themselves, if you're injured or not. And I don't know. It's like Terry says, you know, that they don't want to give you no money whatsoever.
Okay.
Let's say that again and say, instead of they, say the insurance companies. It's like Terry says,
Okay.
insurance companies don't want to pay.
As Terry says, the insurance companies don't want to give you anything. They want to keep all of it to themselves.
What was the excuse they used that they didn't want to pay off?
Really, not too much of anything. They just don't believe their doctors that I do have medical problems. They want to keep on dragging it on until they can prove that maybe I can do some kind of work, you know, and I've got doctors saying that I can't. And Brown Crouppen's lawyers have got the records.
And would you recommend Brown Crouppen to, and you can answer that by using their name in your answer if you can.
Yes, I would recommend Brown Crouppen for anybody that has a problem with insurance companies on any kind of an accident.
Can you think of anything else that, any specific things, the way they helped you that you appreciated?
They,
Brown Crouppen?
Brown Crouppen fought to get me back in to see a doctor after the insurance company said I was not hurt anymore, that their first doctor, they only wanted one doctor's opinion that I was able to go back to work, and I was still hurting, and Brown Crouppen fought to get me in to see another doctor, which he did 2 more operations.
And what do you think would have happened if you hadn't had a lawyer in this case?
I'd have been out in the cold weather right now without anything at all to fight with, because what they was offering me for almost 6 years of being off from work wouldn't matter to about 2 months of pay if I was working.
How long do you think it's going to take for this case to get wound up?
Brown Crouppen's lawyers, we're supposed to go to court in sometime this month, at the end of this month, and we're figuring maybe 5 or 6 more months before they really come around to any kind of settlement.
Are you optimistic?
I'm keeping my hopes up. Brown Crouppen's lawyers say, hey, you know, we'll fight to the end.
Great. Okay. Anything else?
How about, you know, you said you saw the TV commercial and, you know, some friends that used them or whatever.
Mhm.
When you think of Brown Crouppen, do you think of a big giant law firm, or, you know, is it, and I guess in other words, were you treated like a customer, or were you treated like a number, basically?
I was not treated by like a number with Brown Crouppen. I was welcomed in. I came in about 7 o'clock one night and saw Mr. Crouppen and his associates that night with 2 casts on my hands straight from the hospital. And he stayed here until to see what I looked like, you know, personally. He could have sent one of his associates down to see me, but he was here personally to see me that night.
Good. Okay, I think we got it.
Okay. Great.
All right,
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Gets a little warm?
Yeah.
Yes, I have a, okay, here we go. We're talking today because we're doing a commercial for Brown and Crouppen. And obviously there was an accident, something happened that led you to Brown and Crouppen. So tell me a little bit about what happened.
On March the 16th, 1992, I was taking 3 movies back to a video store in Potosi, Missouri. About 2 miles from the house, over a 2-sided hill, I was hit head-on by a school bus. The school bus was doing approximately 55 miles an hour. I was doing about 10 miles an hour. In repercussion of this, it took them about 2.5 hours to get me out of my pickup truck. They flew me into St. Louis University Air Ambulance. I was 13.5 hours in my initial first surgery. And the next morning, when my wife came, I looked at her, I was coherent. I was on a lot of morphine, but I was coherent enough to tell her that we had to get an attorney. And she says, I'm sorry, would that hurt anything?
No, that's fine.
She said, who would I get? What attorney would we get? And I told her I wanted her to call Mr. Brown and Mr. Crouppen. And she said, why? And I said, in the phone book in St. Louis, there's tons of attorneys. I mean, they're in there by the zillions. And I've watched so many different commercials on television that for some reason Mr. Crouppen's always stuck in my mind. The way that he spoke, the way that he handled himself on TV. And that was my reason for selecting Mr. Brown and Mr. Crouppen. My wife, in return, she immediately called, and I had asked her to please ask to speak to Mr. Crouppen, Mr. Brown, or Mr. Crouppen personally, theirself, because I thought that they would handle the case better at beginning than what one of their other attorneys would. My wife didn't even have to come down to the office here. Within 2 hours, Mr. Crouppen, Mr. Brown, I mean, was at the hospital and in the waiting room and in conversation with her of what had happened. She basically told him the story, as I told you, of what happened, being hit by the school bus. And he took a few notes from her, got back to his office, and within 6 to 8 hours, he had an investigator out there on the property and talking with the school bus driver and getting information that really amazed me that he got out there so fast and got on things. And from that point, she had conversed with him a couple of more times, and he had asked her if she minded if he went ahead and got started right away on the case, because he thought it was a very serious accident also, which he did. And then they referred us over to one of their attorneys here at the office, which was Mr. Michael Swafford. Michael Swafford is one of the best people I'll ever meet. And the case pended on for, I'd have to say about 3 years, a little over 3 years. But in that time, I had had 16 surgeries. From the accident, I've been 16 surgeries from it. I've never had to have an attorney in my life before, but I'm pleased that I had called the office of Mr. Brown and Crouppen, because they handled everything so professionally. There was no pressure of what happened, can we do this, can we do that, or it was just like a team, like we were the only 2 clients that they had. And knowingly the size of the law firm that this is, they've got clients galore, but they just treated us like we were just a personal part of the family here. Between working with Michael Swafford and him working with Mr. Brown and Mr. Crouppen, we were able to start getting things rolling on the case. And they just so much, you know, I lost for words when I say how much respect I have for this law firm. If I would ever have to use an attorney again, it would be Brown and Crouppen. there was no ifs, ands, or buts. It was, everything was just handled so professionally that we were included on, my wife and I were included on everything that they did. We were involved in the decisions. We were asked when they wanted to do depositions and talk to different people. They asked our permission first. Was it okay? They personally went out on the scene themselves and picked up debris from the accident to show how far it had been hit and how hard it had been hit. They took pictures of the accident scene, and I was pushed approximately 50 to 60 feet. The bus never did put on a brake or anything. He said he didn't know what he hit, what stopped him or nothing. He said he was in shock, but my truck had stopped him. And the engine from my truck come in onto the floor and crushed my legs. I had a fractured pelvis. I had, all my ribs were broke. I had a broken clavicle. I had, my chin was cut all the way to the bone in a V. My nose was broke in 3 different places. My eye was cut real bad from my glasses being broke. They did have to use the jaws of life to get me out of that truck. It was that serious. It was even on TV and on radio in Potosi, and they had a hard time there because of trying to keep the people away from a serious accident like this, because Potosi is a small town. It's in Washington County, and it is a small town. When something that big happens, everybody flies to it. They had to have police officers at the end of the streets to keep everybody from getting up by the scene of the accident. There were 6 kids on the school bus. The next morning, after I was awake and coherent enough to come out of surgery, the first thing I asked my wife, even before the attorney, was to call to Potosi School District and see if any of the kids were hurt, because I was very concerned about that. And none of the kids did get hurt. Scratches, one they kept overnight at the hospital because she was a little girl and she had some abrasions on her face and that. They were our neighbors. We knew all the kids and that. And the bus driver was just shooken up. He took about 3 days off of work because of this. I'd done a lot of research and checking on things of my own just to keep my mind busy. Because prior to that, I had 2 open heart surgeries and 7 bypasses. And I'm a very fortunate person to even be here. I'm blessed by God, and I do have one good guardian angel. The hospital, I had 9 doctors told me the impact of the accident should have killed me, and if it didn't, that the heart should have. And everything is hung together and held out pretty good this far. Taken into consideration, I had a 72 GMC truck that I was restoring, and them things are made like an iron horse, and it was just put like an accordion. It looked like an accordion when it was done with it. But I done, like I said, checking myself. A school bus weighs 15 tons, and when they hit you head on at 55 miles an hour, and I was doing 10 miles an hour, and to be hit by 15 tons, it's quite of an impact.
You need to get a drink or something?
Yeah. It's getting dry.
So, you first got to the hospital, you actually called Brown and Crouppen? Okay. But go ahead and have a drink, and then you can tell us a little bit about that. You weren't kidding. I asked him one question, boom, 6 minutes.
Told you.
How long is this thing supposed to be?
However long, I mean, it'll end up being a 30-second commercial.
A 30-second
Okay,
commercial?
well, we gotta say something.
So we got 6 minutes. Well, another good point that before she starts talking that you might want to put in there is that Michael Swafford, which was a trial attorney, even come to our house, so I wouldn't have to make the trip into the office because I was in two casts. Both of my legs were totally destroyed, and I was in 2 casts. The left leg, I almost lost. It was hanging in 2 pieces. I did finally wind up losing the knee. They had to do a total knee replacement, but I had a doctor that was just set in his mind that he was not going to let me lose that leg, and he did, and I thank God for that too. So I was lucky. I'll let go ahead because they're going to break this up.
Okay.
I talk too much.
Okay, so your husband gets injured, and
And I know nothing about it.
he says, we need an attorney. Call
Well,
Brown and Crouppen.
yes, I got up there, well, I didn't know anything about it, state troopers, nobody came to tell me. My daughter called me at 10:30 and said it was on the news up here. And so she came down to get me, and we got back up the hospital at 2. He was in surgery. And then after he came out, I went home and rested at his mother's house for a little bit. And then when I got back up there at 10, I said, "Hi, hon." And he's got morphine and everything in him, you know, black and blue. And he's, you know, he says, "Honey, I think we need a lawyer." And I said, "Do you have one in mind?" And he says, "Yes." And I said, "Well, could you tell me, please? Because we've never had to have an attorney." And he told me Mr. Brown and Mr. Crouppen. And then he passed out. So I said, "Okay." And you can imagine how shaken I was. You know, I mean, I thought, well, you know, this is bad. And so I went to the phone and I called their company, Mr. Brown, Mr. Crouppen, and the assistant or secretary, okay, wanted to know, you know, can we start that over again? Okay, anyway, when I did call, there was a secretary and out front, I guess, and she just, you know, wanted to give me somebody, and I said, "No." I said, "I need to talk to the secretary and Mr. Brown." And she was kind of startled, and she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well," I said, "you know, there's really something has happened," and I said, "I don't want anybody but Mr. Brown or Mr. Crouppen, or both of them. I didn't know how they worked it." And so she gave me the secretary, which was Sally Phillips, and she listened to a little bit of what I had to say, and then she excused herself, and she wanted to talk to Mr. Brown. She came right back, and she said, "Mr. Brown will talk to you." And so I was in the hospital, you know, at a pay telephone with my daughter, and I told them what was going on, and that I thought I needed his services because I didn't know what was happening, and I really didn't at the time. And I would say he asked me where I was going to be, and I told him in the hospital I wasn't going to leave it. And so, you know, he told me, he says, well, will you be there in about an hour and a half, 2 hours? And I said, oh, yeah. And so we were sitting in the waiting room, and I seen Mr. Brown walking down the hall with this briefcase. And I told my daughter, I said, that's Mr. Brown. And you got to remember, I had never seen Mr. Brown before. And so he came in, and we discussed a few things in that. But he wanted to go in and meet my husband. And of course, you know, he was under all this morphine, and I had to go in and just make sure that, you know, they gave him a shot and he was calmed down. And so they gave him a shot and he was calmed down, and then Mr. Brown came in and he shook Jim's hand, and he really couldn't say too much because of the condition that my husband was in. But he told him that he was, you know, going to do everything he could for us. And in fact, I don't even think Jim remembers him being there.
Yes, I do.
And so then Mr. Brown asked me a few more questions in the waiting room, and then he asked me my permission if he could get an investigator out there right away, you know, like even that afternoon, or maybe next morning, to go to the sheriff's department and all that. And of course, you know, I said, yes, do what you have to do. And it just seemed like, to me, that things just started happening so soon. And like I say, I haven't had any experience with attorneys, but Mr. Brown, I don't know what it is. I just felt like I could really could trust Mr. Brown. And I haven't met Mr. Crouppen yet, and our trial lawyer, until much later. But so he just, you know, he was just, to me, he was just wonderful. And I didn't know attorneys, I didn't know what I expected really, but at the time, he knew that I was in so much grief. And I mean, I didn't know which way to turn or anything. And I really didn't understand why we needed an attorney at all at that time. But then he just got busy on the case, and then every day, basically, you know, at the hospital, he would talk to me because he knew that's where I was every day, and until he got out of the trauma area, and then he was in the rest of the other part of the hospital. But
when you called Brown and Crouppen,
mhm.
did you have to look up the phone number, or did you know it?
I had to look it up.
Did-
But I went to the waiting room and got a telephone book, because I figured if my husband could tell me, you know, directly who he wanted under all that morphine, that I was going to get Mr. Brown and Mr. Crouppen. And so that's what I did. But in the whole course of this, this 3.5 years, they made it so easy on us, as you know, I myself, and I know Jim does too, but you know, we felt like we were their only client. And like, you know, every time something came up, Jim was always in the hospital having another operation. And so they would work around that for us. And there was never anything like, you know, they were the boss, they said what went. Nothing like that. It was Jim and I, and they would come to us and asked, you know, what we thought. And it just worked out great. We just had we just had just a great experience with Mr. Brown and Mr. Crouppen. And like Jim said, you know, if we ever needed another attorney, I know right where I'm coming.
Okay. Take a short break. We're gonna stick another tape in.
Oh, thank you. Here, honey.